Hey guys, welcome to the video. So in this video, I'm basically just going to catch up on all the stuff I didn't get to in 2022. It's going to be split up into two parts just because I don't want it to be too long. A lot of this is going to be rapid fire. I'm not going to go too in depth in everything. I will let you know if there are spoilers before each of the segments. So we're just going to get right into everything that I missed in 2022. I also should let you know that I actually did make a video on Black Adam and the new Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared television series, but Warner Brothers was very adamant on keeping that video down. So just quickly my thoughts on those without showing any footage. I thought Black Adam was fine, and now after the whole DC shakeup, it's not really relevant. Fine leaning more towards negative. I just thought it was fine. The hardcore cameo was really cool. And the Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared TV show is really great, and it has to be seen to be believed. It's, it's very weird and surreal if you're familiar with that show. So those were my really quick thoughts from that video. Now moving on to the 2022 stuff. I did see Lord of the Rings of Power television show, and I really was just not into it. I kept waiting for it to grip me. I watched it every week, and I didn't like it. Galadriel was not a character that I found particularly interesting. It wasn't until the last episode that I found it interesting, but they're foreshadowing all this stuff that we knew was going to be the case because of our knowledge of the Lord of the Rings story. And yeah, I was not into the show, and I wouldn't particularly care for a second season. Going into spoilers for Lord of the Rings, I did think that the reveal of Sauron was cool, and I did like the terraforming of that land into Mordor. One thing about the show that I really liked was the relationship between Elrond and Durin. I thought that was probably the strongest and best part of the show, and their banter is really cool. My brother and I kept joking because Tarantino very much resembles the new Elrond, so we were just doing Tarantino impressions while he was on screen. But yeah, Lord of the Rings, it was just not for me. What was for me, though, that aired at the same time as Lord of the Rings was House of the Dragon. So in case you need to know a bit of my background on Game of Thrones, I really loved Game of Thrones. I thought this last season was very disappointing, although I did recently rewatch it with my roommates, and it went down much smoother this time, knowing what to expect and sort of not having to brace myself for it. And it was not as bad as I initially remembered, but I do think it could use some polishing, and I do think an extra season was needed. That being said, I do think this show is spectacular, and it completely cleanses the bad taste left in my mouth from the last season of Game of Thrones, as well as it being one of my favorite television shows currently going. All the characters are really interesting. I didn't think the time jumps were too jarring. I think Daemon is a really interesting character. It's cool because it's all the political intrigue of Game of Thrones without the White Walker stuff, and I do love the White Walker stuff, but what I'm saying is this show still kept my attention regardless of not having the more fantastical element of Game of Thrones. And I'm really interested to see where it's going. I do think the last episode was a bit underwhelming, and it felt like set up for the finale of the show and not the finale itself. And, that is a bit weird, especially considering the fact that we have to wait not 1 but 2 years for the next season. It's going to be tough because I really love the show. I was thinking the casting of both Rhaenyra and Alicent was really great for both the young versions and the adult versions. Obviously, there's some stuff that you have to suspend disbelief a bit, where it's like, Alicent's sons look older than her now, but we are going to keep the actors who play those two characters on the show for future seasons, just so the changing of actors doesn't make us lose connection to them, so that makes sense. But yeah, it's a great show. It looks great. When you look at season 1 of House of the Dragon versus season 1 of Game of Thrones, obviously with it following Game of Thrones, it's going to have more of a push behind it, and the visual effects are going to be amazing. There's some stuff that they shot in the volume, which is what they use for The Mandalorian and some of the Star Wars shows. And yeah, the show just looks spectacular. They really went for it in a way that, the first season of Game of Thrones couldn't really, because, it had to earn the trust of the audience. And it's also convenient that the first season of Game of Thrones isn't as big in scale as the later seasons, as, a story should be. those are my thoughts on House of the Dragon. Moving on to Tales of the Jedi. So Tales of the Jedi was the collection of shorts. Half of them were Ahsoka shorts, half of them were Dooku shorts for the, it's a Disney Plus Star Wars show. I thought the Ahsoka stuff was fine. I didn't really care for it. Filoni obviously really loves Ahsoka to a fault, I think. But the Dooku stuff was awesome. And seeing all of that connect to the stuff in the prequels and how we see Dooku delete Kamino from the Jedi archives, and Dooku hearing about Qui-Gon having fought Maul on Tatooine, all that stuff. The meanwhile stuff is really cool. Seeing Dooku's turn and sort of loss of trust in the Jedi Order, I thought that was really interesting. So then the next thing that I saw that I loved was Barbarian. Barbarian is a horror film written and directed by Zach Rager, and it's a movie that everyone was saying it's better not to know anything going in. And I do think the idea of the craziness of the movie is a bit overhyped, but the movie is really great, and it's probably my favorite thing that I saw this year. That's within the realm of horror. Not best thing in general, but I do really, really love the movie. I love how small it is. It feels very play-like at points. All the performances are great. And I don't really want to get too much into the plot, but I do think that thematically it's really interesting. Looking at the way that women navigate the world versus the way men navigate the world, and the things that each of those two genders has to sort of tiptoe around when it comes to interacting with the other gender. I think that's really fascinating, both from the male and female perspective. I thought it was really interesting, and definitely worth a watch. I don't want to say too much about Barbarian. I'm not gonna have a spoiler section for it. It's on HBO Max. I really, really recommend it. Barbarian is an awesome, awesome film. And it's a really great first film for a director. Also, Zach Krager, this is somewhat related. He actually sold his script. So there was a bidding war for his new scripts. Jordan Peele's company was going after it and all this stuff. So apparently the script is really great, and I'm really looking forward to what he has coming next, Zach Krager. And he's another director now that I'm really going to look forward to anytime he releases a new movie. I also saw Wendall and Wild, speaking of Jordan Peele. It's the Henry Selick directed stop-motion animated film. It's on Netflix. And visually it's great, but I do have to say I was very disappointed by this. I think the ending was really rushed, and thematically it didn't really work or tie together. And I hate saying that, because you watch this movie and so much effort was put into it. It's all shown on the screen there. And Jordan Peele and Keegan-Michael Key voice Wendell and Wild, and their performances are a lot of fun. It's a very funny movie. I think the characters are cool and they're interesting, and it's nice seeing a Henry Selick directed stop-motion film for the first time in forever. It's just that the writing, the script is where the issue is, not in any of the animation. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous film. But, for example, if you compare this to Coraline, it's no competition. Coraline is leagues better. Coraline is a great film, and I think this film is not very good. Moving on, I watched the final season of Atlanta, and this was a hard one to say goodbye to, because Atlanta was one of my favorite shows that was running, and it's cool that they decided to put an end to it. It feels a bit weird because they filmed seasons 3 and 4 back to back, so this sort of feels like season 3 part 2 and not season 4. And I personally think this is a huge improvement on 3. 3 is easily my least favorite season of Atlanta. This season was really great. It had a lot of really good episodes. And I do think that the ending is interesting in terms of how we perceive not just the finale and the entirety of the show, but each individual episode can be put into the formula of what the last episode is trying to say. And it causes an explanation for the weirdness on the show, but also it doesn't say that the weirdness on the show is not possible and just weird abstractions of reality, the sort of stuff that David Lynch talks about in his works. I thought it was a really strong ending to the season, and I'm really sincerely going to miss this show. I also watched Black Panther 2, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and I do think I need to watch it again. It's on Disney Plus now. I watched it in the theater when it came out, but the viewing experience really sucked because there were kids in there running around and screaming and shit. So it was really annoying to watch the film. I did like it a lot. I think it was a really great send-off for Chadwick Boseman. I think that it was really interesting and clever to incorporate the real life passing of his into the story and to push Letitia Wright's character Shuri into the forefront as the protagonist of the film. I thought Riri Williams as Ironheart was really cool, and I'm interested in her show. Okoye was also a character that they did interesting stuff with, although I'm not sure how I feel about her show. And also, when you hear the announcements of the TV shows before you watch the movies, you can sort of reverse engineer it, and you're watching Black Panther being like, oh, she's going through this because it's going to lead into her show. And that's sort of like, it's distracting because it makes it feel more calculated and less like an artful decision. I'm not sure how much Ryan Coogler is going to be involved with the Okoye TV show, but I'm sure it'll be, well done if he's involved, or if they get other really talented people involved. The MCU has really dipped recently, but this is definitely one of the better ones. This actually feels like a movie and like a piece of art that someone created, and not just a commercial for future Avengers movies. I think that the Namor character is compelling. I thought that he was really interesting. I do think the movie should have ended differently. I would have found it interesting if Namor had slit his own throat and had caused a Talokan war with Wakanda, and the only thing saying that Shuri didn't kill him was her word. I thought that would have been really interesting. But no, Namor's still around, and Namor, he's got some schemes. He's scheming some stuff. The action scenes were also good, just like in the first film. Angela Bassett is really great. Obviously, we get that certain cameo when Shuri goes into the ancestral plane. That was really interesting and put a lot of complex on Shuri. Although I do think that there's too much of her internal battle, I think, comes in way too late in the film and should have been earlier. But I do really like the theme of science versus religion that she's going through throughout the film. It feels like that theme is not as strong primarily until the end, but also just not strong in general, because we know for a fact definitively that there is an afterlife in the Marvel Universe, specifically for the people of Wakanda and the kings of Wakanda. So it does feel bizarre that Shuri has a struggle, even though she knows for a fact the afterlife is real, instead of it being faith versus science. And I do really like that the movie opens with her praying that her brother lives, and that she says that she'll never doubt the ancestors again if they let her brother live. And of course he dies, and that creates that snowballs into her conflict between science and religion. But yeah, overall I thought the movie was fine. I do need to check it out again, just to sort of refresh my memory, but I did like it, and I did see artistic vision in it that I appreciated, that I think we have not been getting with a lot of more recent Marvel projects. Moving on, I also watched the Hellraiser remake, or reimagining, however you want to call it. I actually had not seen any Hellraiser movie until this year. This year I watched the first two because people say those are the only good ones, and I thoroughly enjoyed both of the original Hellraiser films. And I wanted to watch those two before watching the new film. And the new film I thought was pretty good. I thought that it did have vision to it. There's that nice, gross feeling that is associated with Hellraiser, but I really feel like it didn't go crazy enough. There was creepy stuff with the Cenobites going after our protagonist, but I really think that they didn't do enough with how weird Hellraiser can get when you look at those first two films. And I'm sure even the sequels get weird, but I think that the mythos is sort of missing in the new film. I did think it was pretty strong, though. Moving on to the Andor television series. The Andor television series is really great. It's hard to grade on a Star Wars scale. It doesn't feel like Star Wars, but it is really good. And I think this goes more into the realm of being a regular TV show that we can compare to House of the Dragon or Breaking Bad or shows like that. Not that it's as good as Breaking Bad or anything, but just this feels more like a show before it's Star Wars, and none of the other Star Wars shows feel like that, and I think that's what makes it feel unique and makes it interesting. The writers, and Tony Gilroy specifically, are self-proclaimed not Star Wars fans, and so they can write without feeling the need to do fan service and stuff like that. The most fan service we get in this show is basically just the naming of planets. Like, planets get mentioned and that's it, but the characters are the most important part, and I really love that about the show. I still prefer The Mandalorian, but in terms of... I heard this other critic say that in terms of the realm of Star Wars that this is operating in, not being fan service and being what this show is, it's spectacular at it. I think having this really nice long season worked well. I like the slower pace. I like the sort of splitting of the arcs. The prison arc was great in particular. And I like how adult the show was. Cassian just like killing people made it feel brutal and gray, and we got more of a continuation with Rogue One. And in the first episode, Cassian walks into a brothel. That's the first scene. So it's like, all right, this isn't your grandpa's Star Wars. This is like real life, you know? I really like that they incorporated that into the show and to make it feel more adult and more mature. And yeah, Andor is great, and I'm very excited for season 2. I wasn't expecting it to be this good because it's like, you know, Diego Luna is great, and I love him, and he's really good in Rogue One. But just in general, it's like, why do I really care about this character, especially knowing where he ends up? But they're doing really interesting stuff with him. I kind of wish he had more incentive, because I feel like he sort of just goes with things instead of making decisions on his own. I wish he had more personality, and you do get glimpses of it, but I really want more of that in the second season. But that's really a nitpick. The show is really great, and it looks wonderful. It's not like the other shows that use the volume. It really uses its visual effects to its advantage in a way that doesn't feel cramped. So, like, it uses green screens, and all the visual effects look really great. The Mon Mothma stuff was really cool, and I really like that side of it. Seeing Coruscant, Kino was great, played by Andy Serkis, really great surprise, and I think all the characters are really great. Stellan Skarsgård as Luthen is really cool. Obviously, we got the return of Forrest Whitaker as Saw Gerrera. But yeah, Luthen is a really interesting character. I was telling my brother that I was a bit scared that Luthen is too much like Tobias Beckett from Solo, especially in look, but he does seem like a really different character, who's just willing to sacrifice everything for the rebellion to a fault. And I think that, and how he goes against Mon Mothma, is really interesting. We also have Bix, interesting love interest character for Cassian. All the stuff with her and Cassian's mother on Ferrix was really great, and the whole Ferrix rebellion in the last episode was awesome. I think Dedra Miro is also really interesting inclusion. We don't really get people who are within the Empire and seeing them throughout the show, seeing them trying to succeed, and us rooting for her up to the point where she starts torturing Bix, starts torturing a character that is also interesting to us. And then, you know, obviously a lot of the stuff with Dedra comes from her, you know, her coworkers, and specifically her one male counterpart that, you know, they keep trying to like get at each other. And then Dedra's weird connection with Cyril Karn is it seems really interesting. It seems like they're going to be codependent, maybe oddly romantic. I mean, Cyril seemed to show romantic interest in her. I'm very interested to see where that relationship goes. Probably more than anything else on the show. I do think I want to watch it again and one more time through. I don't think I was always fully in the emotions of the show, but I did really... It went up a bit, especially in the last episode during the Ferrix rebellion. I thought that was really awesome. So I watched Glass Onion in theaters when it did its limited 1 week or 2 week run before it showed up on Netflix. So I was really excited. So excited that I went to see it in the theater. And Glass Onion, personally, I loved Glass Onion. It lived up to the hype. I like it about the same as the first Knives Out, although I've talked to other people who say they like Knives Out much more. Specifically when it comes to the structure is where I hear people complain, in that you go through the film and then you find something out and then you go back and then you see everything from a different lens, which is what I thought was cool. And I think all the cast is really good. Edward Norton in particular is spectacular in the movie. And I do like Katherine Hahn a lot. I wish she did more in the film. Just that, you know, she had more to do with her character, not her performance. Daniel Craig as Blanc was really great. There's a lot of cameos throughout that are fun. Batista's really good. Everyone is doing a really great job. And yeah, I really liked the mystery. It was fun to just sit down and sit in a theater and watch a mystery with people and just have a really good time at the theater. This is easily the most fun I had at the theater. The vibe of the film is just really fun, and I love the dialogue and just how intricately everything is plotted out. The stuff with Blanc foiling the party was really funny. It's a funny film, and I really enjoyed it. It's on Netflix, so I do want to watch it again at some point. It's a really fun film. I enjoyed it quite a bit. So the last thing I'm going to talk about in this portion of the video is I saw Wednesday. I saw it the day it came out. I just, Tim Burton was making a new show, and I was watching the trailers, and I was like, okay, this feels like classic Tim Burton, and that's why I'm going to watch this. I marked my calendar. I was like, the day this comes out, I'm watching it. My brother and I watched it over the course of the 2 days, that Wednesday and the Thursday right after. And I do think that the show was pretty good for the most part. I think that the original films with Christina Ricci, I think they capture the vibe of what the Addams Family is more, and that's just more about them being weirdos. With this, because there's a whole plot and a story to it, Wednesday's character is somewhat sacrificed, and there's some inconsistencies with how Wednesday would react to things, in terms of Wednesday is not a character that should feel any sense of peril, because she would enjoy peril. And with this, she has to be the main character of a mystery show, and so she has to feel, there has to be stakes, and so Wednesday can't be apathetic to horrible things happening to people like she normally would be. So there's a bit of a conflict between what Wednesday actually is as a character and how Wednesday is represented in the show. Apart from that, I loved it. I was worried that Wednesday was going to be the Tim Burton surrogate character and just be like, oh, I'm weird and no one gets me. But I really like that the other characters on the show shit on her and just make fun of her for being so glum and sad. I thought that the little kid with the bees was funny. I really like Enid. Enid is a very fun character, and I think that she balances out with Wednesday really well, because they're both so extreme, and their extremities that are negative are outweighed by both of their positives. And so when Enid's too much, Wednesday balances that out, but the same thing happens the other way around, and I really like that. I thought the mystery was cool. I like the monster. It looked like Crazy Frog. It looked very much like a Tim Burton design. That was really cool. I think Tim Burton did a really good job directing those first 4 episodes, and it looks like they're competent enough to write the show without Tim Burton for the second season, because I don't really see why. I don't see him being, committed to a show like this. But yeah, really pretty strong show. Fred Armisen as Fester was fun. I did feel like the ending was somewhat lackluster. It just didn't feel entirely right to me. It felt like this is the ending, but not really the ending of this show. Also, something just really interesting and weird was my brother and I, when we heard the Wednesday show was announced, we were like pitching ideas, and I was like, oh, what if it's like a show where she's at a school and she's like solving mysteries, and like she's like going around in like dark alleyways with like, or dark corridors with a flashlight or something. And my brother really hated that idea. And then I looked up the synopsis, and that's exactly what the show is. So just off the top of my head, my pitch for the show ended up being what the show actually was going to be, and I think it came out pretty good. Of course, the show has blown up now. I guess a dance can do that. But yeah, just a good show. I enjoyed it a lot. Not amazing or anything, but I am looking forward to the second season and seeing where they go with it, with some of the things that they've planted seeds for and where that's going to go. So that'll conclude the first half of my 2022 catch-up. There will be a part 2 where I talk about the other things that I missed. And that'll be it for now. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.